Restaurant Radio.
Broadcasting from the restaurant and food capital of America. Well, right,
Yes.
Chicago, Illinois. But when it comes to the party capital of America, everybody takes a break, everybody around the country, and kind of gives that title over to New Orleans. And a guy that spent his formative years in New Orleans, he is a native, is it New Orleaner? Is that what it would be called?
The proper term would be New Orleanian.
Well,
New
he's a New Orleanian, and he is also, aside from that, the mastermind behind Lucid Absinthe. It is the one and only Ted Breaux. Ted, welcome to the show.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, Ted, when it comes to Lucid, you've done it, you've created it, you got past the ban, you were able to get it on shelves and in liquor stores and bars all around the country. Well, what are you doing now as you kind of gear up for Mardi Gras?
I'll tell you, Mardi Gras, it's one of these things whereby you go, you experience it, and if you're a local like me and you've been through it, either you get out there and you hit the parades and do it in full force, or you just stay on the sidelines. And more often these days, I find myself doing the latter.
So it's a little bit like Taste of Chicago.
It's pretty intense. Okay. And the thing is, it's a couple of weeks of building intensity, and of course everything just erupts on Mardi Gras Day, and it's a bit crazy. It is.
The party world, it becomes the epicenter of it as far as New Orleans. But growing up there has got to be something that would be a very unique experience. It is a very unique city. It's a city that is held to traditions, but also has a rich tradition in the spirit world. And I don't necessarily mean the Anne Rice kind of stuff, right?
Although that's true too.
Even the liqueurs. But give a little history on yourself, Ted, and how you decided to become one of the leaders as far as the spirits and, of course, inventing Lucid.
Well, I tell you what, my story is a bit of an epic drama, but to give you the cliff notes, I've studied absinthe for almost 20 years now. My family, both sides of my family, are rooted in New Orleans and the surrounding area, and they originated basically in France and Spain and Switzerland, and they came to New Orleans back in the 1700s. And the thing is, New Orleans has always been a melting pot. So it was a large port city. It was the largest city in the South until around 1900, and it was very cosmopolitan, very heavily influenced by the French. My grandparents and definitely their parents all spoke French, as did much of the city, and very much influenced by all things French. New Orleans was referred to as the Paris of the New World. And, spirits, basically, New Orleans being a big shipping center, I mean, you could find pretty much anything there was in commerce, from cognac to rum to champagne to absinthe to all the various libations that were enjoyed on the riverboats that went from New Orleans and up north. And it's quite a melting pot, and still is today. Back in those days, basically what's credited as being the world's first cocktail, definitely the world's first style of cocktail, is something that we know today as the Sazerac, which is basically the official cocktail of New Orleans. And back in those days, the way cocktails got started is people, basically you get up and you work in the fields, and what do? You have an eye-opener, and basically, this is long before one-a-day vitamins existed, and people would take their preventative medicinal herbs, and they would take whatever it is they were drinking, their whiskey, their brandy, and they would hit it with a shot of those bitter herbs, and absinthe being one of those medicinal preparations, and sweeten it up with sugar. After all, a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. And there you have the birth of the cocktail. And you're right, New Orleans was the epicenter of it, because Antoine Amédée Peychaud is credited with being someone who basically first brought this style of taking medication to light. And, of course, it became a delicious tipple, and from there forth springs the cocktail.
Okay, so this really started as more of a cure-all elixir than it did a let's go party on Saturday.
That's exactly right. And when speaking about absinthe specifically, absinthe was basically a digestive tonic that was thought to, when taken preventatively, to ward off fevers. And so when you have this potent anise, sort of Swedish anise, herbal, floral tasting medicine that left the bottle at about 120 to 140 proof, hey, why not? It's healthy. Drink to your health. Basically, that's exactly what people did.
And ironically, causes fevers the next day. So, but you know what? And Dane alluded to this and mentioned it outright in his opening. There was a ban on absinthe. How long did that last?
Well, the ban on absinthe here in the U.S. lasted about 95 years. It lasted from 1912 until March 5th, 2007.
And you celebrate that day every day since that
That's basically our National Absinthe Day. Exactly.
But why exactly was it banned? That's before Prohibition. Why was absinthe, down with absinthe? Why was there a movement to ban it?
Well, here in the U.S., absinthe was definitely rising in popularity, and there wasn't really a reason to ban it here, except for the fact that our lawmakers were aware of this controversy going on in France regarding absinthe, and they weren't sure what to do about it. Basically, in France, all during the time when, anyone who's a wine aficionado will tell you that back in Europe in the 1870s and 1880s, the vineyards of Europe were almost completely wiped out with phylloxera. And when they were making their recovery, basically the popularity of absinthe had replaced wine as the national drink. And so the reasons for banning absinthe are really deeply rooted in sociological, political, economic reasons, and a lot of political mischief in there. No real sound reason for banning absinthe, but nevertheless, that shows you the power of lobbies and governments, and that's exactly what happened, and eventually absinthe was banned in France right around the beginning of the First World War.
Now, of course, they couldn't say that, hey, we'd like to make more money, so let's outlaw your product so that so that no one can buy it, although probably, market forces applying, that's what happened. But what are some of the things that they said were going on? And I know that absinthe to this day, whether it's true or not, has got a reputation for being relatively or somewhat mind-altering, or that you'll experience some kind of illusion or something like that. Now, it can't possibly be true, but where did they get that?
Well, let's think about this. We also hear the same thing said about tequila, right?
Well, that's true.
And, I probably heard more stories of people, having supposed, hallucinations and dancing on the tables, of course, from drinking too much tequila. The thing about this is much of this was lifted from literary sources and taken at face value, and a lot of it was figurative. Basically, absinthe it is a potent beverage, no doubt about it, when crafted properly, and I emphasize that phrase because basically millions of people enjoy drinking absinthe almost on a daily basis without incident. It's just because back in those days, and in many cases like today, there weren't any regulations as to what deserved to be called absinthe, and there were some unscrupulous makers of the drink that made very cheap, adulterated versions that did poison some poor alcoholics. And this fact was conveniently exploited by the enemies of absinthe, and that's why. And really, that's where the bad reputation or the negative connotations of absinthe are rooted, really. But in actuality, absinthe is a potent, stimulating, wonderful herbal drink. And it's really, there's nothing in it, nothing that was ever in it, and we've proven that through published scientific studies involving antique bottles of the finest brands of the 19th century. We've proven there's nothing in those bottles that's harmful. But it is a wonderful drink, and it's very easy to drink, which one has to be careful when you're drinking something that's 120, 130 proof that goes down so easily.
Now, we're talking with Ted Breaux, of course, the mastermind behind Lucid Absinthe. And you mentioned when it's prepared properly and when it's enjoyed properly. And what kind of research did you have to do in order to go back, get those recipes, and try to bring absinthe to the marketplace and bring Lucid to the marketplace and make it as close to the original as possible?
Well, I started working on that back in the 1990s, and I had some original texts. I had a lot of indications. It's kind of like making wine. So you read enough, you understand the basic ingredients, but the art is in the crafting. And really what was the Rosetta Stone in my case was coming across full sealed bottles of absinthe representing the finest brands from the 19th century. And in 2000, I became the first person, being a scientist and a chemist, I was the first person to ever actually subject the contents of those bottles to modern scientific scrutiny. I analyzed the contents of those bottles and used that information to reverse engineer original products. And in doing this, I hoped to revive the original tradition of absinthe that was so in danger of being lost.
Now, were these bottles, they had already been produced, and then because of the ban, they were never opened? Where did you find these?
Well, what happened was absinthe, remember, it was very, very popular, and despite all the negative press that was generated to try to demonize absinthe, its popularity, it didn't stop. It just became more and more popular with each passing year. And what happened was when those persons of status and some wealth back in France and places in Western Europe, when they learned of absinthe being banned, what did they do? They bought it, they stuck it in their wine cellars, where it became forgotten for many, many years. And occasionally, when one of these cellars is liquidated, if you're lucky, one might come across a bottle or two of absinthe.
Wow.
That's really cool.
Well, you mentioned prepared properly. You've done that through scientific research and, of course, the artisan touch of a true spirit maker. And you said, but enjoyed properly, too. This isn't the kind of thing that you just, open up like a can of Budweiser and just chug it down again. This is it's a formidable spirit. It's a powerful one. But what is the best way, or the way you would recommend people enjoy it, not only for Mardi Gras, but whenever they're in the presence of Lucid?
Well, I tell you, the easiest way, the purest way to enjoy an authentic absinthe is the French method, which basically involves just diluting it with a little ice water until it becomes cloudy. You can add a little sugar to it if you like. Absinthe was never bottled with sugar. It's a dry spirit, although it tastes slightly sweet. And that is the predominant way that it was served in Western Europe. And when you go to New Orleans, to places like the Old Absinthe House, which has been right there on Bourbon Street since 1874, you will find the old dripping fountain still on the bar. It's probably the only place in the United States where you find evidence of absinthe being served in the French way. But here in the United States, a century ago, in places like Chicago and New York and San Francisco and many places around the country, absinthe was always an ingredient in cocktails. And in fact, I have compiled a list of absinthe cocktails that I have found from bartender guides dating back to the 1800s, all published here in the United States, and I have come up with dozens and dozens of various cocktails that employed absinthe. It was a popular cocktail ingredient, and the thing is, when it was banned in 1912, suddenly had a whole class of pre-Prohibition classic cocktails that couldn't be made because absinthe could no longer be had. So now we're just rediscovering those cocktails.
Well, now all you have to do is get a hold of some of those recipes that Ted has. Go to your local liquor store, whether it's a Binny's or someone's ancient cellar, if you may find something, right? And get yourself a bottle of absinthe, preferably Lucid Absinthe. For people who want to find more information about the recipes, everything that you've done to bring this to the marketplace and what's going on with Lucid, where can they go?
Well, Lucid can be found in all 50 states. In fact, no one has distilled Lucid using those original 19th century methods on the scale that we have since the ban. So we did that. We wanted to make sure it was available everywhere, and you can find it in pretty much any good liquor shop, or you can have your favorite liquor shop order it. And it is an authentic absinthe. We're always asked, did you have to reduce or remove anything to get the law changed? No. We did it exactly the way that it was done a century ago, and that's what makes it special.
And so the website is drinklucid.com?
drinklucid.com, and there you can learn about Lucid, learn about absinthe and the history of absinthe, and you can find some cocktails, classic and modern.
Now, Ted, as a native New Orleanian, right, as we head into the Mardi Gras season, even if you're going to be on the sidelines through basic experience and common sense, what kind of recommendation, if you had to give one or maybe two recommendations for people going to enjoy Mardi Gras down in New Orleans, what should they do or not do?
Well, the one thing they should do is go uptown and catch one of the big parades and catch Orpheus or Bacchus, something like that. One of the big parades, and it's pretty mind-blowing, the amount of money and effort they put into building these floats all year and how big they are, and they have all this neon, and it's pretty crazy, and it's family friendly, so it's a lot of fun, and be prepared to get hit by beads and other strange objects. And if you're really feeling brave, then you can get down to the French Quarter, which is elbow to elbow, and it is a little bit of mayhem, and but there's always something there that. There's always something that will make an indelible impression on your mind. Sometimes something maybe you didn't want to see, but nevertheless, it's all there.
Not always so family-friendly, but certainly friendly.
Certainly friendly. Maybe a little too friendly at times. It's a little bit crazy.
All right, it is drinklucid.com, the mastermind. Again, behind it is Ted Breaux. Ted, can't thank you enough for being in the show.
Hey, likewise. It's been great.
Restaurant Radio.